So very shortly, we all know that there are certain issues with recursive service. We also know that recursive service tend to be traditionally a free service, which means that it costs money to implement, but you get no revenue from it, which by itself causes a problem. But what is to some extent actually good is that there is growing awareness of the problems in the recursive space. I mean, we've had malicious traffic for a long time. That's not a new phenomenon in any way. We've had all the tracking stuff for a long time. Although it's growing rapidly, it's not a new phenomenon. But the awareness is growing, and that is actually helping with, let's put it this way, focusing attention on solutions. So these are the questions that are sent out when you take a clean machine, you just boot it up and you load the front page of a Swedish newspaper. There will be a question afterwards. In a while. So the question now is, how many questions were there? 394. Which is quite a lot. And this is not illegitimate traffic. This is legal tracking. This is what the big providers do to keep track of you. This is the old web cookies basically moving over to DNS space. And most of you already know that. So it's nothing new. I think it's rather interesting to see it visually now and then. So what about this problem? Are there any solutions? Yes, there are lots of solutions. We have a whole industry of so-called threat feed providers. Most of them are commercial. We have various commercial providers of, let's call it filtered DNS services or protected DNS services, which are great for companies that can pay for it, not quite as great for private citizens that typically don't pay for it. Just because of the national citizens having this problem, there are initiatives in some countries where you try to provide some sort of national recursive service. CIRA is providing such a service in Canada, and that's fine. Nominet is providing such a service in the UK, and that's also fine. And we have similar things in a couple of other countries. DNS for EU is not a country, but it's sort of a similar thinking at least, and then we can discuss whether it's a good idea or not. So the real topic of this very short talk is to introduce something that we call DNS TAPIR. This is a very, very new project. It was an application to the Swedish government late last year. It was approved this spring. All the contracts were signed before vacations during the summer, and work is essentially starting now. How does this differ from various other alternatives? Well, depending on your point of view, it doesn't differ at all, or it differs a lot. Like everyone else in the protected DNS space, there will be some sort of analysis based on DNS data. However, we will not be providing a DNS service. We don't want to get into the DNS service space. We only want to get into the analysis part. So the intent here is to provide an analysis service that gets feed of DNS information from resolvers. And in return, there will be some sort of threat feed or an intelligence feed, whatever term you want to use, that enables the resolver operator, if they so choose, to filter out bad stuff. Overview of the design. If you look at this and you compare it to the one design slide in the DNS for EU presentation, it's basically the same thing. There is nothing unique here. All of these services have essentially the same design on the inside. So the difference isn't there. So the difference here is that we intend to open source this. And the reason why we intend to open source this is that, to begin with, the Swedish government doesn't really like to fund commercial stuff. because they are interfering in the marketplace. So that's one reason. Another reason is that in Sweden, there has been a discussion, I wouldn't say national discussion because not everyone cares, but a discussion among people that do care on the topic of filtering. And filtering isn't popular. Filtering is considered to be something bad. So there is an uphill battle of how to convince people being resolver operators, for instance, ISPs, government agencies, etc., that this is actually a good thing. And one way of convincing them that this is a good thing, they will essentially never buy a commercial service which is closed and they don't know what happens on the inside. One way of convincing them is to make it open source. One way of convincing them that their sensitive information isn't leaking is to allow them to, instead of installing a kit from us that does data collection and aggregation, they can just download the code from GitHub or something, build it themselves, and if that's what's needed for them to gain trust in this to be doing the right thing. And this is basically where it ends. The analysis engine will never ever see the individual queries, and we will feed back this threat feed, this intelligence feed to the resolver operators, and then it becomes their decision whether to act on it or not.